Hey YouTube, we're back with another video on this second generation Cadillac CTS. This is the 2010 model, but this should apply to the 2010 through 2016 models. And don't forget that I've got a bunch of other videos on not only this vehicle, but the second generation CTS as well. So be sure to check out my channel and hit subscribe if you would. So what we're going to talk about today is the official Cadillac roof rack cross rails accessories for this vehicle. So what got me thinking about these roof rack cross rails is that every Christmas we go to a Christmas tree farm and cut down our own live Christmas tree. And usually I borrow a truck to get the tree home in. But this year that truck was in the shop. So I had to kind of improvise, and while this worked, it was a little bit less than ideal, and I didn't really want to test my luck with that again. So I thought, well, hey, the cross rails might be nice to have, and started looking around, and the cross rails new are kind of overpriced in my opinion for the official GM ones, but I did manage to snag some secondhand ones on eBay at a good price. And I mean, really, for cross rails, there's not a whole lot that can go wrong with them, so secondhand ones are fine. So the problem that I ran into is these cross rails being secondhand, they did not come with the instructions. Now, putting these roof racks, putting these cross rails on is not rocket science by any stretch of the imagination, but there are quite a bit of nuances that the instructions cover, such as where they want you to mount them specifically on the roof rack bars, and weight limitations and all those kind of other things. So I think it's helpful to have those instructions. And so did some digging, and believe it or not, these instructions are not available online on Cadillac or GM's website anywhere. Made some phone calls, and thankfully, after some back and forth and trial and error, ended up finding somebody at a local dealership who was able to make some phone calls to the vendor that makes the Cadillac accessories and got a PDF of the full manual. And so I'm going to be referencing that in this video, and I'll also, near the end of the video, have some scans of the manual available. The instructions are like 40 pages long, but really there's actually only 2 pages for each language, and then 2 pages of some pictures. So I've got those printed out here, and I'll also put those in the video as well. So before we get started in installing these on the vehicle, let's take a close look at one of the ends of one of the crossbars and get familiar with it. Again, this was something I had a hard time finding. Any information online was just some close-up pictures or anything of how all this worked. So when I was looking at secondhand ones, it was hard to know if anything was missing or broken because there just wasn't any good information available. So this is what the end of one of the crossbars looks like, and right here is a plastic cover, and we'll get to that here in a second. And if we flip the crossbar over, this is what the clamp that clamps onto the bar looks like. So it's got some nice rubber in here, and that protects the nice shiny bars on top of the vehicle, and it even has a little bit of a rubber seal around here that keeps, I guess, dirt and grime from getting in the bar and scratching it when you're going down the road. So like I said earlier, this has a cover, and it can be a little tricky to get off. Mine being secondhand, some of them pop off easier than others. But basically what I found is the easiest thing to do is grip it right down here and just pull it off like that. And so now we can see what the inside looks like. And so a couple different notes here. One is that on step 3 of the instructions it says, identify small raised rib on crossbar. This must face forward on vehicle. Each section also has a large arrow. This should point forward on the vehicle. So these do have a front and a back to them. Now the arrow I didn't have any problem finding at all. So that's right here. So you know, that makes it pretty easy. That's on the end of each bar. So that should face towards the front of the vehicle. Finally, I figured out what they were talking about. what do they say, the raised rib. So if you look at the crossbar itself, on the back here we just have a smooth area, and then on the front there's a little bit of a raised rib here. So that's another way to quickly identify which end is supposed to face the front of the vehicle. I'm not sure why it matters, but I guess it does. So this bolt right here is what you are going to loosen and to put the bars on the vehicle, and what you're going to tighten back up to properly install them. So I was fortunate enough to get the official tool with my crossbars, even though they were secondhand. But if you got your crossbar secondhand and didn't get this, or maybe your vehicle came with the crossbars and this is missing, they didn't put it in the glove box like they were supposed to, or whatever, even though this appears to be some sort of a security type of a wrench, you can see the little hole, and there's actually a corresponding raised area inside this bolt here, it doesn't seem to matter. And so what I figured out is that a standard Torx, let's see, what is this? This is a T40. So this is just a standard Torx wrench, and this came from a cheap AutoZone or Advanced, I can't remember where, whoever sells Duralast, set that I picked up years ago. So the T40 from that set fits this just as good as the official factory one. So if you've got these crossbars and you didn't get the tool with it, you can just use any old T40 Torx wrench. And there does not appear to be a part number for this official tool that I could find anywhere. There's a part number for the whole kit with the bars and everything, and there's also a part number for the instruction booklet, but other than that, we don't get any other part numbers. Okay, so on the official instructions, they have us on step 1, use your hands, open all 4 covers. So we've done that, and use the Torx driver provided to loosen the screws until the clamps hang free of the screws. So they actually want us to just take this all the way out to put it on the vehicle. So we'll just take that out. And here in a minute, once we get this loose, the bottom piece is going to drop. The bottom, and you can see the bottom part of the clamp just dropped. And so what I would advise you to do is just go ahead and take this out and put it in your pocket or somewhere safe while you're putting them on the vehicle. And so now we can get a better look of how the bottom works. And so you can see the receiving bolt there, and then we've got a nice rubber surface here, as well as a rubber surface up top. So they want you to do this to all 4 ends before you get them up there, which is smart because you don't want to get up there and fight with things and end up scratching the top of your vehicle. So one other little thing is that all 4 ends are also adjustable, and this is really tricky. So when we first put them on the vehicle before I had instructions, I couldn't get them to fit, like they weren't long enough. And so quickly realized that they do slide out a fraction of an inch. And so the best way that I found to do that is hold the bar like this and stick your thumbs up and push. And you can see how that went up. And then you can push it down to go the other direction. So you may have to do that when you get it up on the vehicle to get them to fit properly. And there's one of those little nuances that, you know, without the instructions, we fought with them for a while trying to figure out why they wouldn't fit. So, you know, I think that it'd be a good idea if Cadillac had posted these on the website somewhere for a PDF download or something like that. Okay, now that we've got all 4 ends open, we're going to go ahead and put them on the vehicle, and then we'll talk about where the proper place to tighten them down is. We want to be careful not to scratch the top of the vehicle. Get that on that end, and this one's too long, so I'll push that back in, and there it goes. And I guess in hindsight, you know, it is kind of nice that they have this raised bar here, because you don't have to open the covers to figure out which way the front of the bar goes. So I guess that was a smart feature. Same thing with the other one here. Alright, so that can be a little bit tricky getting them to the right length, or the right width, I guess, of the car. And that's where having a second set of hands would be helpful, but not totally necessary either. Okay, for reasons that I assume have to do with safety and loading and balance, there are proper points at which you're supposed to tighten these down. Now, all of the measurements that they refer to begin at right here, right where the silver part meets the black part of the roof rail here. So the first measurement they want is 9 1/4 inches from the rear rail edge to the rear bar. So let's see, I just kind of threw it up there, but that was pretty close. I'm at 9 1/2, so I'm sure it's not rocket science here, but we'll try to get it as close as possible. So that's about 9 1/4. Yeah, 9 1/4, and then 24 1/2 inches between the two roof rails. So I got I'm quite a bit ways to go on this bar here. So 24, that's way up front. So that's actually, just as a point of reference, that's right about where the two front doors, or where the front door and the back door meet. So if you're going to throw this up there, just kind of use that line right here as a reference point. And something else you can do to make this process easier is you can open up the rear door and stand inside the vehicle to get a better look. And so I'm just going to go ahead and pull this back off since I'm nowhere near close, and set it back down. Now let's remeasure that. So 24 1/2 inches, we're still a bit off. So that's 24 1/2, and actually it looks like the back side of this cross rail almost exactly lines up with the gap between the front and the rear door. So I'm going to go over to the other side and measure that up. So 9 1/4, that's about right, and 24 1/2, but it's right about there. Okay, now that both crossbars are properly mounted, we're going to go ahead and put the bolts back in and tighten them all down. Open the cover back up and pull this up. And tighten that down. And you can see as I'm tightening that this is sealing up around the bar. The official instructions say tighten it to 5.9 foot-pounds, but I'm just going to snug them up. And so now that we've got that end snugged down, we'll just make sure this clips back in place, and we'll do the other three. Alright, now that we've got them mounted on the vehicle, let's talk about loading and everything else. The maximum weight rating for these bars on this vehicle is 220 pounds. And so another thing we'll point out here is that the top of the vehicle has a rubber strip on it, so that if you're just going to strap something down, like a ladder or a Christmas tree, that will help it not scoot around on the bar. However, these bars support what they call the T-slot system. I don't have anything like this, but I'm assuming there's bike racks and all kinds of other things. And so this little rubber strip, once you pop open the cover, you can simply pull it out, and then you will be able to mount other accessories on this bar with the T-slot system. And so that's the way that little rubber piece looks like. Again, something that if you lost or they didn't come with, good luck finding, because there doesn't seem to be any part numbers for this stuff that I could find anywhere. But putting it back in, it just very easily snaps back in. That's it. So another interesting thing that the instructions point out is that if rear crossrail is moved backwards from the recommended position, it may degrade the antenna's reception performance. So, you know, in addition to this being here probably for balancing the load properly on the vehicle, they're saying if this bar were mounted back further, you could interfere with the reception of the antenna. Another interesting thing I'll point out that you may or may not be aware of is if you were going to mount something on these bars that is longer than where this antenna is, or would reach further, like a ladder or maybe a sheet of plywood or something like that, this antenna is easy to remove. So you can just unscrew it like this, and that'll give you the needed clearance to mount something on the vehicle. This part of the antenna here is your XM and satellite, I believe, receiver, and then this is the AM and I think FM bands here. So you should still have XM and satellite by removing this, but you probably won't get very good AM and FM reception. Now, obviously, if you mount something like a sheet of plywood that covers this, then yes, you're probably going to lose things like your satellite reception and your XM radio. And really, I would argue mounting almost anything of length, like this simple 6-foot ladder, it would be a good idea to remove the antenna, because as you can see, it reaches back over that area when you properly balance it across the two bars. So some other things to point out here. One is if you're going to mount something that's long like a ladder, you're going to want to make sure that you either don't use the rear hatch or position the ladder or other object in such a way that it does not overlap this gap here. Because otherwise, when you go to raise your hatch, you could have a bad day, especially if the object was already strapped down and couldn't move. And another thing to point out, which is probably kind of obvious, but don't forget that your sunroof, when you open it, does protrude over the top of the vehicle. So these bars should hold any objects up close enough or far enough away from the glass where it shouldn't be a problem, but just keep that in mind in case you have something that has things that are dangling down between the bars or anything like that, and you were to open up your sunroof for some reason while you have stuff strapped to the roof. Just make sure that it's not going to interfere with the operation of the glass. Alright, so one last thing we'll touch on before we end this video is road noise. That's always going to be the #1 question with these bars is, do they whistle, do they make any noise when you're going down the road? So we're going to do a quick road test. Obviously this would be a test if you didn't have anything on the bars. I'm not going to do anything loaded on there and test it because there's no end of possibilities of what you could have strapped up there, and surely that kind of thing will make some noise. But the bars up there, empty in their proper positions, do they make any noise? So let's go for a road test. So I'm running about 55 miles an hour right now, and I hear a little bit of wind noise. You probably can't even hear it on the camera. If people were talking the vehicle, you probably wouldn't be able to hear it. As I'm getting up to closer to 65, 70 miles an hour, I hear just a faint whistle, but nothing super annoying. So not too bad overall. Alright, well that about wraps up this video. These crossbars certainly won't win any beauty awards. They're a little bit ugly in my opinion, but hey, they're functional. And so what I'll do before we end the video is I'll throw up some close-up shots of the official instructions in case you want to pause the video and jot anything down. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button if this was helpful, or give this video a like. I would greatly appreciate it.